So, ladies and gentlemen, Marcus Horan. Flannery and Fiona Reidy. Right, so lads, I suppose thanks all for being here this evening. We'll start off, I suppose, with all things Munster. Maybe look at the Ireland possible panel for the Six Nations, the panel for the Six Nations rather, and the games that are coming up, and I suppose how we think we might bounce back from that World Cup. But I'll start off with Tom. I suppose, look, Tom, we don't have a Champions Cup quarter-final to look forward to with Munster this season, but no point in throwing the toys out of the pram. It is what it is. We had a tough group, we had a tough pool, still this coaching team in its infancy, and look, we haven't won a trophy in a long time. Let's go hell for leather for the Pro 14.
Absolutely. I think there's lots of mitigating factors as to why Munster may not have done as well this season. They have lots of reasons why it could have maybe done a little bit better. We've got a compressed season, coaching changes, but I think for the rest of the season, especially for the Pro 14, topping conference B and get into a home semi-final at the very least is certainly an achievable aim.
I suppose, Tom, we've kind of got a bit sick of finishing. We see how important it is rather to finish top of the conference. You don't want to be heading up to the RDS for a semi-final. If you're going to meet Leinster, you want to meet them in a final.
Absolutely. I mean, going to the RDS is incredibly difficult for any team in Europe. So going up there and expecting to win a knockout game, it's always a very tough ask. So again, when you get to a final, literally anything can happen. So that's Munster's aim, obviously, to get there and then hopefully try and win it.
Marcus, I suppose, look, you've been covering a lot of the games this year. Your initial thoughts on the fact that we don't have that quarter final, but like I said, can't afford to feel too sorry for ourselves either.
No, not at all. But I suppose a little bit of perspective is needed with the way Munster have gone. I mean, if you look at the group, as we said, it's and I'm not making excuses, but it was one of the toughest groups. But we were probably a drop goal away from qualifying. And I think what's missing with the group is just that little bit of cleverness to close out a game or to manage the games a little bit better. Even Pro 14, there's a couple of games that maybe could have got a little bit more out of them. The one in particular maybe was Edinburgh down in Cork. Just games like that they should be winning. And there was a lot of young players playing that game that day as well. So these are things you would hope that they're going to learn from. And if they're not, then I suppose the fault is either with the player or the management that these guys aren't learning, but massive learning curve for them. I think we're not far off qualifying out of an incredibly difficult group, and suddenly we could be having a different conversation here tonight. So I'm really optimistic. What's really giving me buzz is seeing the young players coming through. They're chomping at the bit to get out there and play and show themselves. So I think their hand is going to be forced now a small bit by using them with the guys that are away. So I'm really excited about them coming back in 3 weeks' time and playing, and we'll see what these guys are made of then.
Joy, I suppose sometimes you hear the old adage of you learn more from defeat than from victory. Some, like Marcus said, some close calls, but some harsh lessons ultimately for Munster in that pool this year.
Yeah, I think you learn from experiences and certainly from the lows, and you just regather and you move forward. And what an opportunity with Pro 14 now. They need to focus on that, and certainly with the Six Nations coming up, you have the young guns coming through and ready for that challenge, and very optimistic with the talent that's on that squad, Craig Casey's and Ben Healy's and so, and hopefully they'll take those opportunities and show Munster, the world, what they're capable of.
Just Jerry, moving on to yourself, I suppose, for a guy who's been worked closely with all these guys to now being on the other side of it, do you still feel it when things don't go right? Does it still hurt almost when they don't get the results you think they might?
Yeah, well, I won't ever stop being a Munster supporter. So, and I see the knock-on effect even more so. Like when you step away from it, you see when we don't get out of our group in Europe, you see the knock-on effect. I see it in people day to day. It is really tough, and I suppose I would have a very strong affinity with a lot of the lads there because I coached them last year and I know how hard they work. And I think, as Marcus said it's the margins are so fine that a lot of people who would have just said, "Oh, we didn't get out of our group, it was terrible." We got to 3 European semi-finals in a row, and people sort of thought then that, "Oh well, if 2-2, well then we should definitely go into a European final next year. But that's not the case, because we wouldn't have got out of our... Billy Holland stole a line out at the end of the game against Exeter, and if he doesn't steal that line out, we don't get out of our group. The margins are actually that fine, and they have been that fine every single year, and you have to work so hard to get out of your group and then to have a small bit of luck. And I think that the squad is probably better now than it has been in the last 3 years. It's just the fact that a couple of things didn't go our way, and it's not all doom and gloom. I think there's, like Marcus said, and Joy referenced as well, there's an awful lot of talent coming through. I think that people just need to, I suppose, have realistic expectations. Also, we're always going to be pitched against Leinster, and Leinster are on a different level to any other team in Europe at the moment. So that's what we're being pitched against.
So Fiona, from your point of view, as somebody who's been on a hugely successful UL Bows team for many years, that kind of expectancy to be in the shake-up every season, does that put a pressure on the team itself? I mean, when you look at this Munster team, that they're kind of being compared to teams before, and what's that pressure
absolutely.
like?
I think us as Munster fans, everyone has a massive expectation of Munster and expect them, as lads of reference, to reach these semi-finals and finals every year. And when they don't, then suddenly, they did so badly. But as Jerry said, the fine margins there are something we don't see as just fans. And it's certainly something that would affect you as a player then, with that expectation does come pressure, and it's about developing and learning and growing into that role and knowing that with time you will be used to that, and those performances and those results will go your way.
Yeah, so I suppose, Marcus, if you're looking at Munster for the rest of the season, I suppose, not just for the rest of this year, but going into 2020, 2021, what would you say would be like an aim for Munster? Like, what do they need to do to get to that next level of, I suppose, getting to that level of challenging for Heineken Cups once again?
I think silverware has to be the challenge. I mean, we've a love affair, all right, with Europe and trying to win that, but I suppose there's a little bit of realism, and if you can, the benchmark is Leinster. I mean, there's no getting away from it. They're putting out maybe second-string teams sometimes and blitzing teams, and we have to try and produce a squad that can do that we can still function really, really well when our internationals are away. And not only that when the internationals are coming back, they're worried about their places. We're not there yet, and the boys, whether it's academy or whatever, are doing huge work there to try and develop guys. But it is a numbers game. We don't have the numbers down here, and so you're trying to guess. Maybe I think we were lucky, with a group of guys that came through together, and that's sometimes what Munster have to do. We have to try and develop a group of guys that will come through together, and I believe there is a young group coming through together that are pushing each other and challenging the Conor Murrays, challenging the Peter O'Mahonys for their places. So, but the crux of it, and why people are here, why people buy tickets, why we go to matches, we want silverware, and I think Fla touched on it there. You want these players to understand that they can actually affect the mood of their community. You see that people get a lift when there's a big game, or you beat a big English team in Thomond Park. And to get our younger players to understand that, and to have a good bunch of homegrown players in there, they'll feel what the supporters are feeling. And I think when they strive to win a bit of silverware, it'll kick them on for better things. And I think we just need that one little bit of a taste, and it'll go from there.
Because I suppose that thing about the timeline for developing players is something I hear about every day. What would be the challenges that would be, say, different from Leinster compared to here? As in, it seems that they are getting their players ready slightly earlier for Pro 14 level and maybe beyond. So, like, as in, when people don't really get the challenges, I suppose, there is of developing guys to get to the level of rugby that we see in 2020 when it's such a hard physical game. Like, so what are the kind of the challenges that are there?
I suppose for me, look, I had a chat with someone recently about, I think they're involved at Black Rock School in Dublin, and I just kind of said, look, oh, geez, Black Rock, they're not the school they used to be, and he goes, oh, no, things are good now, we're just getting a new 4G pitch put in and for the senior team. And I'm just thinking, my old school St. Munchins have spent the last 25 years trying to fund the refurb of the school. They've finally done it, and it's been done a few years now. But like, we take 25 years to maybe do a development like that. They have a whim up there where go, do you know what, we need a new pitch, and they get it done. You see grants going in with the government of, I don't know, Belvedere College getting a resurface of the pitch. They already have a pitch, but they're just getting it resurfaced because it's damaged. And that's the reality we're dealing with down here in Limerick. It's the money that's up there, the investment that's up there is huge. And when they have facilities like that, and they have backroom staffs for their senior cup teams that, even professional teams in some leagues would even dream about, it's very hard to compete with that. And what you're getting then, the product that they're getting, what Leo Cullen is getting, is ready-made Pro 14 players when they're coming out of school. Whereas down here, we have to develop those school leavers a little bit more, maybe a year or two longer than what Leinster are doing. And that's the crux of it for me, to be honest with you. When you have that level of investment, that amount of numbers that they can actually, Belvedere could throw out 6 or 7 senior teams in a season. You can't compete with those numbers.
I suppose, Joy, you are seeing this every week out in the field. I mean, for people who might not ever be on a professional field, just kind of what level of physicality do you see as a referee in these games like that? Have you seen a kind of an escalation over the course of your time refereeing?
From a playing perspective or from a refereeing perspective?
Both.
Look, I think the game has evolved, certainly. I think you can see that by the size of the players. They've reduced in fat and built in bulk. I wish I could use you two to reference. Look, the collisions are that bit more. Well, not a lot more than just a bit more. Those collisions are massive, and certainly these are the bumps in the road for us when you come across collisions that are controversial. That's the nature of the game. It's so many grey areas when you see head and head collisions. Should it be a red card? Should it be a yellow card? Should it be a play on? But certainly the game has evolved significantly, and that's part and parcel. And I think you have to move with the way the game moves. And certainly, if you look at Ireland and their performance at the World Cup, I think maybe we didn't evolve as much as we would have liked to, and that certainly had an effect on where we came.
And Jerry, I suppose you were involved very recently with Munster, obviously, and I hear every day about throwing young lads in to get them experience, and people are in a real rush for these lads to get in and get playing. What are your thoughts on getting younger players involved? Like, as in, what are the challenges that people maybe might not know on a coaching level about getting young lads in to even Pro 14 level rugby?
Marcus was pretty much on the money there with all his points about the players that are coming out of school in Leinster they're physically ready to go, so they can get onto the field straight away, and they're technically and they're tactically a lot further along the line, and a lot of that comes down to, like Marcus was spewing bitterness there about how the government is giving all this funding, but there is more money up in Leinster, and I think it's not just Munster's problem. It's an issue for Ulster and for Connacht as well, in terms of how can you bridge the gap. And I think it's getting better coaching in it. And when a player picks up a ball, like, what's the pathway for that player to get to the academy, and how can you get that player ready quicker? I think it's better coaching. Facilities is definitely going to be a part of it as well. And in Leinster, they can have dedicated full-time coaches. So if you make someone responsible for something, then they're accountable. So, like Marcus was saying, Marcus and myself went to St. Munchins College. So if I was doing really badly in geography, my mum wouldn't come into the school and say, Jerry's doing badly in geography, and the teacher would go, have you seen Jerry throw the ball into the line out? He's, that wasn't his remit, is to teach me. So when you've got guys whose full-time remit is actually to coach in rugby, and that's what they identify as a full-time coach, either a director of rugby in a private school, we don't have the resources to have that they have in Leinster. So we've got to try and work around it. But I think there's massive positives to be seen, because if you're following Leinster, you're following the number one in Europe, possibly in the world. So the young Irish players are really, really good to take on detail, to learn, and I think there's an awful lot of passion for rugby in the country. It's just about trying to say, well, we don't have the same infrastructure as Leinster, but Munster, Ulster and Connacht can find ways around it and try and get the players ready that bit earlier. And I think it comes down to investing more at the underage level on the way up towards the academy, because again, you don't want to have to, when you finish a season with a senior side and you finish up and you go, well, where do we pitch? If the benchmark is Leinster, the benchmark is Saracens, and they have the benchmark to win a European Cup is generally 8 to 9 regular starting international players, which if you go back to Munster in 2006, 2008, that's what Munster had as well. We currently have half that. We have 4. So we had 4. I don't know what we'll have now coming around, but we would be at half the level of top class quality players that's required to win European Cup. So Munster isn't a club that's going to turn around in the morning and say, well, we need to sign 4 new internationals and that's going to cost us X amount of million, because it's not a sustainable way of building a club. So that money should go into developing the pathway. And you look at what, like, I don't even know will Leinster want to go out and sign a big name player, a marquee player, because they have such quality there. So it's pretty clear what you have to do. It's just not easy. And I think the fact that you can see how Leinster are working it, you go, well, this is the model, so we just got to invest more and put better coaches at underage level.
I suppose, Fiona, you've been involved as well on field very, very recently. You're still involved. What would be like your takeaway at the moment from the way the game is going that you see from a physicality perspective, just like even getting yourself physically ready to play even just a regular club game, not even scaling upwards?
Across the board, the physicality has definitely come up. We've gone from that 10 years ago, a player having more fat, and less lean mass, to now players being really lean and physically strong. And that does increase the collision. But also then from a development perspective, as Fla was saying there about development into underage resources and stuff, myself and Eve Briggs are currently with the Munster Under 17 development girls side, and it's really good to see that level of investment is going into underage girls now to bring them up to a level where hopefully they can play under 18, for Munster, Ireland and beyond.
Jerry, I suppose just to pick up on something you said there about how coachable and how good on detail Irish players are, and it was actually something that Stephen Larkham mentioned in one of his first press conferences, is that he felt that the Irish players in over here were more coachable than the players he'd worked with in Australia. And I suppose if you couple that with Munster's kind of with a sprinkling of overseas players that they bring in, that's a hard enough balance to get right, especially when there isn't an open checkbook.
What do you mean it's a hard enough balance?
To get, I suppose, players of the imports of the quality that will bring on the guys around them without breaking the bank.
Oh yeah. I think Snyman and Delende, if they materialise, are 2 fantastic signings, and I think that they will make Munster better. They will make the young players coming through in Munster better. But I think ultimately, if that's what you have to go back to every year is, okay, we're not good enough. Okay, we've got to sign 3 or 4. You're competing with the French clubs who've just got way more money, and as for all the stick that Saracens are getting now, and a lot of it is deserved, Saracens still develop the players, and whilst they have cheated financially, they still work really hard, and they have a good culture in the club within the rugby club, with the players and the coaches, and they're a good example of spending money well and developing players. You don't want to be in a position where you just like Toulon just try and buy in guys every year, because for me as a Munster supporter, I want to go out and I want to see a guy like Craig Casey, and I know Craig's dad, I know Craig's uncle, and I have an affinity with the team when I see him playing, and that's what Munster is built on, is that the supporters and the team, a strong affinity between them. So if it just becomes an awful lot of imports every year, it doesn't work. I think Munster will be are wise in if it's Delende and Snyman next year. I think that's a good balance. They're 2 world-class players, and they're marquee players, and I think that they'll make Munster better, and they'll bring up all the young lads in between. But Munster, the main thing has to be the pathway coming through.
So Marcus, just for yourself there, you'll hear a lot of Munster fans harking back to the days of war. Some of the bar stoolers going on about, oh, we used to win this. And did you think sometimes that we just have to kind of draw a line under it insofar as, look, this is not the old Munster. We're trying to change a little bit of how we play. That team are brilliant, but they're not coming back. That we have to kind of accept that and move forward and give these new lads a chance to, I suppose, put their own stamp on Munster.
Yeah, look, it's definitely it. And everyone was talking here about how the game has evolved. We certainly, the way some of us trained back in the day, we certainly wouldn't be surviving now. But it's, I know you're looking at me when I say that. Put that mic down, you pass. Sorry. But it's completely different now, and I think.
His luck that he's playing a few years ago, because he'd be dead in the water now.
Yeah.
Timing's everything, Marcus, isn't it?
Yeah. All right. Okay, Flat. Anyway, but it's no, it is tough, and I think after a few of us started retiring, there was a little bit of a joke as we were leaving. When I was finishing, someone like Billy Holland would come out with his T-shirt with the 2 gold stars, and we're saying, Billy, can you put tape over that? You didn't earn them, And that was the running joke for years. And even when the HPC was built, I remember Donica walking in going, geez, if we had this back in the day, we would have won 4 European Cups. So all the boys could hear it. So it kind of, I think it's wearing thin on the boys inside there. And they do have to create their own history a small bit. And maybe that is hanging over them a small bit. And I suppose the longer that it goes on, the more that pressure is. But again, it's the reality of it. If we keep chasing European Cups without achieving maybe at domestic, or knowing our limits at the moment, and build to maybe winning a Pro 14 and kicking on from there with a young team, then we're probably overreaching. It'll always be down as the goal to win. I mean, it always was. Every start of every season, it was to win. But I think you've got to add in things like get more guys on the Irish team. That was when I arrived at Munster first. That was the first thing. Like Golliv will always tell a story. He was in the Irish team. He was out of the Irish team. He says he's the most dropped Irish player in history. But that was a big driving force for us as a Munster team, is to get more guys on that Irish team. So it depends on what happens in selection in the next week or two. But if we're on the unlucky side numbers wise for that Irish squad, Munster team should be getting together and saying we need to get more guys back into that team. Like that's essentially silverware as well. And there's little things like that where you should be annoyed that there's more from another province on the team. What can you do to get up there? And I think when you have guys who are ambitious and not happy to settle with X amount of Munster caps and chase something else, then the standard rises.
I suppose, Joy, just touching on something there Marcus said regarding silverware, I suppose, look, there's only 2 competitions that Munster can win every year. It'd be the equivalent of a Premiership soccer team if they don't win the Champions League, getting all bent out of shape and not trying in the Premiership. Like, the Pro 14, obviously it is Munster's sole goal this year, but like, if you think of it too, we're going to have those quarter-final weekend, the semi-final weekend, that extra bit of time with the players. It is a cracking competition, and it shouldn't be treated as second rate. I know it is the second competition, but
Well, it's our primary competition now, given our current situation. But I think we have very high expectations as well. We do have, we do hold Munster to very high expectations, and if things don't go our way, we can be very critical. So I think it's about just getting behind them now, backing them, believing in the younger players, as we stated earlier, and taking the opportunities. I think it's key that we win that quarter and semi, get that home fixture against Leinster rather than being away. We need to get all the advantages that we can in order to beat one of the best teams in the world. So I think it's just put the head down, take the chances for the younger players, while the Irish boys, and hopefully, as Marcus said, hopefully there'll be quite a few, involved with the Six Nations, and just see what the younger lads can do and come through and put the pressure back on the senior heads, because I think there's been there for quite a few years where realistically the competition isn't and wasn't as high as we'd like it to be, and I think that's part and parcel of driving each other for bigger and better things.
Fiona, I suppose we also forget that there's a huge interprovincial rivalry at women's level. As someone who's won an interpro at Munster, what's the rivalry like between the provincial women's sides?
Yeah, really would be between Munster and Leinster. In recent times, Connacht have improved. Thanks. But I suppose in Joy's time, I started rugby, and Joy was a stalwart of, well, we moved to Bohs eventually, but with Munster and Ireland, and the competition there was always Munster-Leinster, like without doubt, without fail every year, and like really Munster wanted that cup every year. And I don't know, did Leinster beat you very often?
Not often, but
no.
when they did, it hurt.
Exactly, and it still hurts. So now Connacht have kind of increased their standard, and that has come through investment and through development of their, juvenile women's programme, and that has created more players that can compete at that level. So now the rivalry between us and Leinster is quite severe still, and a loss to them still cuts. And likewise with club, then like Railway Union would be our main rivals these days, and again, like, they won our cup last year, so we're after it again this year.
Yeah, I'm seeing 9 wins from 9 in the league this year, so clipping along fairly nice.
Tipping along nicely, but I suppose when you're a team like we are, we strive for excellence and perfection, and there was a few years there where our standards slipped and stuff, and when, like Joy was referencing, there isn't competition for places and a drive from within to increase your standards, that's when you plateau, and it takes a kick up the arse then, like losing a cup, to refocus, get your focus on those standards and those goals. And really then the young players coming through have been incredible this year for us. I think we've about 8 or 9 new young players all coming up from underage who've slotted right into a starting spot and really driven that competition, and it's incredible.
I suppose just finally for me, the challenges, as somebody who's coaching in the women's game, playing in the women's game, has been in the national setup, what are the challenges? Like we hear the lads talking about funding for the academies and for the men's side of it, but it's a big challenge.
Massive, and I think it boils down to the level of investment with coaching, and the younger we can get boys and girls playing rugby and being coached by top quality coaches and being put into those pathways, then the more we're going to see for Munster, Leinster and Ireland.
Just on that, Fiona, you probably, I don't know whether you agree with me or not, but we watched Ireland in the World Cup the last time, and just seeing even the skill level of the Japanese that time, they were really good. But a lot of the girls that played in the World Cup were converted from other sports, and I think what the women's game will see is the fruits of developing the grassroots, because while the girls that transferred from other sports, they honed their skills really well. But if you can get a girl from 7 or 8 years of age to bring those skills, if they pick up the ball a lot earlier than maybe when they're 22, 23, coming from soccer or Gaelic football, you're going to see the skill level rise. And you're seeing it already, aren't you?
And the thing is, with players transferring from other codes, while some of them have excelled and done exceptionally well, like Lindsay Peat, others, the understanding level and the nuances that as a prop or as a 10 or wherever you're going to play, those specialities are things you pick up with time, and time is something certainly that increases your competitiveness and your ability to play the game and at what level you will compete. And really now, like young girls starting at 7 rather than at 18, which was my story. I don't know, what age were you, Joy? Same. So that's already a massive gap in the last 10, 15 years. And now that they're getting good coaching from a younger age, it's only a positive thing.
Yeah, so I suppose, speaking of Ireland, Six Nations is just around the corner. And after a disappointing World Cup, I suppose, Jerry, like what would be the thought process now of the group as they kind of head into this Six Nations? New coach, new attack coach as well. You'd imagine a clean slate for a lot of the lads who are in there. Like, is there a sort of a focus now on development, or is there still that kind of a really tight balance that's got to be kept there with regards to winning also?
At that level, it's always about it's going to be about results. And anyone that, like, there was a lot of talk after the World Cup of people saying we put too much focus on the Six Nations, and I was there. It's ridiculous. It's like you have to go out with the intent to try and win every single game, and that has to be the goal. I think where there's probably a little bit of leeway is if Ireland were going into the World Cup, if Ireland were playing Scotland and Ireland felt comfortable that, or Joe Schmidt felt comfortable that if he felt I could play Joey Carberry at 10 and give Johnny Sexton a break and we could still win this game, well then that's when you do that. But the focus at that level has always got to be about winning. I can't say it's so much about development, because you've got to win. And when you've got so few games in a calendar year at international level, it's so important. I think that it's a really exciting group. I think that Ulster and Leinster are bringing some really exciting rugby, and their players will be very full of confidence going into it. I think that, like you said, it is a clean slate. It's going to be. I'm really interested to see what they do. They can't change everything because they've got such a limited amount of time. I think what's probably most realistic is you might see an awful lot of Leinster shapes and things like that, because cohesion is so important. And when you've got like a finite period, when you go for transitioning from provincial rugby to international rugby, it's the teams that adapt to that the best at test level that generally win. So I think that, looking at the way Leinster are playing, and I think that there's a little bit of that with Ulster as well, that I think that we'll see a lot of that. And there's just a lot of really good young players that I can't wait to see when they make the step up to international rugby, where they go.
Yeah, because I suppose the next question then is, like, there's a lot of selection decisions that are kind of floating around the place at the moment. Cooney versus Murray. There's a few decisions to be made as well, I suppose, in the pack. A few guys might find their positions are a little bit under pressure. You mentioned there about like playing a lot of Leinster shape. So like, what would that mean? To people who might not know about what a kind of a shape with regards to scaling up from Test rugby up to international rugby.
Well, I think if you look at the way Leinster play, they focus on, it's very, very simple. It's just really rapid, fast, quick ball, and then they have multiple options all the time. They'll play both sides of the ruck, so they won't just keep going open, round the corner. They'll keep coming back to the short side. You'll see the likes of James Lowe popping up. You see the likes of James Ryan popping up, challenging the short side there. It's really simple. It's really simple, but it's very, very effective. I think really good examples of I suppose differences in style would have been if you looked at the Leinster-Munster game and you looked at how Munster were trying to exit, and this is exactly how we had coached the team as well when I was there, is that we were trying to get to the kick as quickly as we could, so we'd win a line out and try and get to the kick, but Leinster knew that as well. So once Leinster put our maul on the ground, then Leinster got all their players back on their feet, and you had like 15 Leinster players standing on their feet. You had probably 5 Munster players on the ground packing out a ruck. So when Munster went to kick the ball into a howling wind, Leinster were able to put pressure on that straight away, and it was just negative outcome. Whereas when Leinster went to exit, they actually were that much more comfortable in their catch pass skills that they were able to hold the ball. Now, they didn't get significantly better outcomes. It's just that it was individuals' execution at the end of the play, but they would get the ball and they would hold it. They would be comfortable to move the ball over and back. And I think that comes from a confidence in the players in their skill set and the coaches in the players' skill set and their decision making, that I think that they're just it's pissing me off how much we keep talking about Leinster here, but I have to say that
there's no way around it.
Yeah. I can't say I'm a fan, but I admire them greatly for what they've done, and that there's the difference between two sides. Like, whereas Munster looked a little bit one-dimensional there, and it's hard. People talk about, well, what's the other plans? If that plan's not working, it's hard enough to get to coordinate 15 people on the field to have one good plan that everyone knows how to execute and execute well. To have a plan B and a plan C, to get the players to buy into plan A is hard enough, and then say, but if this one doesn't work, we'll have this one, and if that one doesn't work, and so then the players don't really buy in. So that's the beauty of what Leinster were doing, is they had multiple options all the time. They didn't need to get to the kick straight away, and I think that we might see a little bit more of that from the Irish side.
I suppose, Marcus, just focusing on something that Jerry said there about the way Leinster play both sides of the ruck, and all this, I suppose, it all keeps the defence guessing, and sometimes Munster have been accused of being a bit predictable. How important are those seconds that you can hold the defence for when you're playing in such tight margins?
Yeah, it is. It is really. I mean, you've really got to test a defender and see if he's going to commit. And sometimes, while it looks great getting the ball out to the wings, you're not actually penetrating anywhere. And to be honest with you, even from an Irish point of view, I felt, if we look back at the last time Ireland played, there was some what looked very ordinary play. We looked like we were going over and back. We looked like doing one-out runners. I remember James Ryan getting up off the ground a couple of times in the World Cup and just getting battered backwards. And Ireland haven't played together since. And they're in Portugal now for a week to try and, I don't know, like as you said, not going to change a huge amount because they can't. So where did they go from here with regards to what we saw in the World Cup, which looked like a team that didn't look like they were going to score many tries, and that's worrying for me, Six Nations wise. And yeah, I agree. You improve things a little bit from a Munster point of view by improving those skills. So as you pass out the line, if it's ball out in front, guys running onto it, he has more time and space. If he has to check a little bit, you're giving that defender a lot more hope to chase you down. And I think that may be the difference if anyone is analysing Leinster or Munster Rugby, just see how the crispness of them getting a ball out to the wing in comparison to any other team. I'm not just, not criticising Munster. I think they're at a really good level, especially with Steve Larkham in there now. He's improved an awful lot, even with the offload and stuff like that, keeping the ball alive. But I think Leinster are at a different level when it comes to that, and they're putting pressure on guys that when they come in to get their chance, you've got to take it, and you might be judged on how well did you give that pass to put a guy into space, and you may not get a chance next week if you didn't do it. So they're under huge pressure to perform, and it's obviously giving them results.
Joey, on about pressure to perform, you've been in successful teams that have come up against hard days. The mentality with this Irish team, how do you think they will turn around the disappointment of a World Cup? I know they can't dwell in it and park it, but does a bad tournament like that have a lasting effect?
I don't know if there's as much pressure on this squad of players as there was in the past. It's a new coaching staff, a new outlook. I think I'm quite intrigued and excited to see how they're going to go. I'm certainly hoping that we'll see a more excitable Irish side where they'll be more penetrative. I think part of the problems was the fact that they weren't winning those rugby collisions and breaking the gain line. But instead, like mentally, it has to take its toll when you're constantly being tackled backwards. So I think, without changing too much, because you just don't want to do that. You don't want to make it overcomplicated because it could just turn into muck. Keep it simple. And I think focus on those physical collisions and winning that mental battle with the opposition and executing when necessary. So yeah, I'm very confident and hopeful that we'll see certainly a different Irish side and that will compete in the Six Nations. I'm very excited about it.
So Fiona, we were all kind of disappointed with how the World Cup turned out, and the fact that we didn't look like a team that ever really got to the pitch of our capabilities. What's it like? We've all had bad days on the rugby field. What's it like when you're playing and it's going really bad and you're there mentally? What's the thought process behind it? It's very hard to turn it around in game.
In game it is, but I think when there's a good core of players that can bring the team in and just have the conversation about what is going wrong, fix the problems on the pitch that you can fix, and try to just focus on the next 5 minutes even to implement one change to see does that actually affect the outcome or not. But then leading on from that, if you can't do that in a game, it's the review afterwards to really see what could we have done here to have had a better outcome. And in terms of the Six Nations, I think the fans, I think we all want a more exciting brand of rugby. I think when the players are relaxed into themselves and relaxed into that environment they're in now, it will lead to, just they have more time together, better skill set and stuff, and just moves will come off as well. So I think the shackles are off them now. There's no expectation really, but I think the fans would like to see a more expansive game.
And also just onto that, they have to be clinical. Like, you're talking about the tight margins. I think coming from a law nerdy perspective here with the referee hat on, it's so important that they minimise the amount of penalties they give away, especially against the top teams in the world, because Again, clocking the points up against us isn't what ideally we want, and that's something that they can control. You can keep it simple, but you can try to keep the referee on your side and try to keep those penalties down and stay in the game as much as possible. So I think that's going to have to be a high priority on the list.
Sure, I suppose if you were to listen to some of the commentary, you'd think that this Ireland team went from being winners in 2018 to being absolute no-hopers. We still go into this competition with a really really world-class bunch of players. Do you see Ireland challenging for the Six Nations this year at the top end of it, or what's a good Six Nations for Ireland, I suppose?
Well, like you said, we have the quality, so a good Six Nations is we win the Six Nations. I think that has to be it. It's about results at that level, and everyone is so quick to go from we were amazing to we were rubbish. The World Cup was not good. Everyone's aware of that, but you look at what happened to us on the way into the World Cup as well. It's not just that we rocked up for the Japan game and played poorly. We had some really the game against England was a trouncing. So that was an alarming going into the World Cup. But the reality is now is that the players are there. We know the quality of the players because we're seeing them. When Marcus would attest to it, that when you go out and you put on a red jersey or you put on your provincial jersey and you play against guys in the European Cup and you beat them, then when you play against them a couple of weeks later at an international level, you're very confident against them. It's difficult if you're losing regularly against them to try and turn it around. But I think that like I said, Ulster and Leinster, the players will be full of confidence. They will feel like there's no reason why they can't go and win a Six Nations. So I think that Joy has said it and Fiona said it as well. It's very exciting and there is a clean slate there. So everyone's going to go out there and try and it's just everyone's going to be going out to put their best foot forward and put on their best display. It's just going to be really interesting to see what side gets selected.
Marcus, I know you love the Welsh from a previous podcast we did together. So
jeez, you don't forget these things.
No, I don't forget. Marcus, who are your, I suppose, if not Ireland, then who do you think? Obviously, England is going to be strong, but do you think you will see anything from France, Scotland, Wales?
Yeah, France have a lot of, I suppose, new faces in there, but I think it's probably time for France to step up. They've had a couple of years now in the wilderness where you just don't know what you're getting with them. But I think their club teams are doing a lot better in Europe. And again, hard to gauge. There's a lot of foreign players in there as well. But I think France could be an outside chance. They're the kind of a team, if they can get off to a good start. Well, look, that's what the Six Nations is all about, is getting off to a good start. But they're the kind of team that, if they do get a bad result, that they could end up losing all the games. But they're just, the players that they have. I think if they explode, they can do a lot of damage, and they'd be the one team that, in some ways, if it's not Ireland, I wouldn't have an issue with it. But if it was with others,
everyone else.
Yeah, bar everyone else. Yeah, and I think Scotland are under pressure after the news this evening with Finn Russell. I think we'd all love to know what happened there, but it's when you leave a player like that quality out, I think their chances are pretty shot as well. So. Although I'm saying that now and we've got him first, so I hope it doesn't come back to haunt me. But look, it's exciting too. Look, Wales, I'm not a big fan, but they've got new staff as well. So this is an exciting Six Nations in that sense. There's a lot of unknowns, a lot of new stuff coming in. I hope it lives up to it, like Six Nations always does, and we get a good few surprises. And the surprises I'd like to see is Ireland playing really exciting rugby and getting results.
Tom, I suppose just touching on what Marcus said there, Finn Russell, he's not going to be taking the field against Ireland.
Not at the moment. Apparently he had too much of a good time on a Sunday night before their week of training, but he's allowed a good time every now and then. He won't be having much of a good time for Scotland. But when it comes to what I think Ireland will look to do in this game against Scotland, when you look at the World Cup, Ireland won pretty much every collision in that game, and as a result we had plenty time to play with. And I think the more time that we can get by winning those collisions in this Six Nations will be vital to actually seeing if we can win it. If you go back and look at the games that Ireland lost against England in particular, the one in Twickenham and the one in the Aviva at the start of the year, we were losing a lot of collisions there, and we were playing, as a result, much slower. And I think that for Ireland, it's not just about tempo, it's about managing that time and giving the players who we know are quality, the likes of Jacob Stockdale, the likes of Gary Ringrose, even the likes of Keith Earls, getting these guys into a position where they can affect the ball positively with time to work with. And and I suppose that comes down to forwards in midfield and guys who can start winning those collisions. And that'll be especially true against Scotland. I would expect Ireland to win that game pretty comfortably, but it comes up to the likes of France and Wales and England. Can they start winning those collisions, and can they start generating the time they need to start actually winning and beating these teams?
Tom, your prediction for the Six Nations?
I think England, even without Billy Vunipola, will be very strong. They've got a lot of guys there who are game winners for them. So I'd hate to say England looking to win it, but I wouldn't be surprised if they got the Six Nations. Maybe not a slam, but I wouldn't be surprised to see them winning.
Fiona, your tip for the Six Nations?
The heart would say Ireland, but really I think we're probably a year off it. And I'd go as well England, unfortunately.
Jerry?
England.
Joy? Come on.
Italy.
I'm all right with that. I've got a foot in both camps.
No, look, I'm a glass half full. I do think from the first game against Scotland, we'll either be severely disappointed because we've tried so much and we failed, or extremely excited. So I'm going to go Ireland. My heart's with Ireland, and I think that I'm very optimistic here. I think they could do it.
Marcus?
Wales.
Wales. France. I would say France. I just think a bit of an unknown, and nobody's really looking at them.
We also have the Champions Cup, of course, coming back up after the Six Nations, and we've got the quarterfinals. Ulster away to Toulouse, Leinster at home to Saracens, Claremont at home to Racing, and Exeter. Exeter, Northampton. I suppose we'll start. Who do you think will like Ulster have a big task on their hands?
Yeah, they do, and you know what, I watching Ulster over the last few seasons, I think obviously the influx of a few Leinster players has really strengthened the squad. But I watched them here against Munster early in the season, and there was a scrum or two in front of us here, and they just went a bit crazy. I think Jack McGrath lost it a bit, and they just gave away some stupid penalties, but they were really riled up. It was a game they were obviously chasing, but I think discipline let them down that day. But they seem to have got themselves in order. It's a tough place to play up there, but how they do on the road is the big thing for them. There's a level of maturity that they need to get to where they can finish out games, and the way even they got the result over in Bath first day out, and the way they finished the game. You can see little things like that when you're getting the rub of the green a small bit like that. You start believing that maybe something big can happen for them. They've some big game players, and I think if they all shine at the same time, they can do a lot of damage to any team in Europe. So yeah, I'm excited to see how they go, but I think they may be up against it.
I suppose Leinster and Saracens, Jerry, when we saw Leinster's reward for having such a fantastic pool, and you see that it's Saracens, like that's going to be a huge clash between two quality sides, whether you like Saracens or not, but it's going to be a massive game.
Yeah, it's a real stinging when you consider like Leinster had done they were so good all the way through the pool stages. Now they've got like a really, really wounded, bitter Saracen side that are relegated. So all they've got left really is the Champions Cup. So if I was the Sarries lads, I would say let's put it together, 3 games, and we're European champions. And it's that I think that the winner is going to come out is probably going to come out of there. I like Toulouse. I like Claremont. Exeter to me are dark horses because I think they're a phenomenally good side, and they've got they're a real tight knit group as well. I would probably say it's going to become from the Leinster Saracens game or else Exeter.
Fiona?
Yeah, like Jerry, that Leinster game with Saracens is going to be a really titanic battle, because you've Sarries on one hand that, you know, they've only 3 games left. They're going to really put everything at it, and Leinster have a huge task on hand then to counteract that and try to get the win. And I think Leinster will come out of that game with the win and then win the competition.
Joy, who do you think is going to be in the shake-up there? And I think Ulster have actually kicked on. They're good to watch this year.
Yeah, they're very entertaining to watch, and I really enjoy. Well, I didn't enjoy obviously them playing and beating Munster, but I did like the brand of rugby that they were playing with and the confidence. I am also impressed with Exeter. I think I like the culture and the heart that they play with. You don't see many teams that play with that amount of passion and togetherness, and I really like the culture that they've created there. But I think Leinster will be well schooled, and whilst, you know, Saracens have a point to prove with everything that's in the back of everything that's happened in the last couple of months, I think Leo will have them well schooled, and I think they'll be lifting that trophy again. I'm quite confident.
Well, I think I spoke with Tom during the week, you know, and there was a thing online about Saracens possibly being stripped of one of their European crowns. We were saying that they can take all of them off them just so long as they don't take the 2018, because the last thing we want to see is another star going on that blue jersey up the M7. So yeah, they can have all of them, but bar that one. I think we're going to take some questions from the audience. We've got a wireless mic here. There you go. So, has anybody got a question? Surely someone.
Can someone turn off the aircon is my question. Please.
Oh, we have one brave soul.
How is it that we manage to, unfortunately, as you've been saying throughout the course of the evening, how is it that Leinster found that gap between ourselves and themselves? Why is it that we're not at the level that we could be at and unfortunately have been at in the past?
Jerry's going to take that one.
I thought we discussed that for the first 20 minutes. I think it's just come down to Leinster have an advantage. You see same with in the football. They have a population advantage, they have a resources advantage, financially they have an advantage. And I think when the thing is that when Marcus and I played, that they had those advantages, but they never really took advantage of them. But that changed in 2009, and it changed with the likes of Cian Healy, Jamie Heaslip, Luke Fitzgerald, all of these guys coming through, young players. I think there was Marcus I don't know, would you agree with me? But I think there was an underperforming culture there. Guys weren't as committed to Leinster as some guys like to go and play for Ireland. But you know, we were always Munster first, and then Ireland after that. And I think that they've really harnessed all of the infrastructural advantages that they have over the other provinces, and they're using them really, really well. Like if you go to St. Michael's now, they will give you a detailed. They have director of rugby there, and the players are given a full breakdown on the game, on how they did in their exits, on their collision winning ability. This is all stuff that probably, you know, Marcus and I probably didn't see till we were 29 years of age playing professional rugby. But now these guys are getting it at schools level, and you know they're full-time trained. I remember when Jordan Larmour was playing in St Andrews, myself and Felix Jones spotted him, and then we started tracking him. He was playing for the Leinster 19s, and we said, this guy's pretty phenomenal. And he hadn't been offered a place in the Leinster Academy, and we were trying to figure out where would we be able to get him down to Munster. And it was like, oh well, he's still young. And when we spoke to the S&C coach there, he was probably stronger and faster than any of the players in the Munster senior setup at the time. So when you have guys like that are physically ready to go, like Jordan has obviously got, you know, technically he's solid. He's tactically got a bit to go, but that's the difference. Like when we would look at players sometimes in the Munster Academy, you would wonder, is this guy going to be good enough to play Pro 14? Is this guy going to be good enough to play European Cup? Is this guy ever going to be a test player? Like when they're looking at players in Leinster, they're looking at James Ryan in their academy, and he's graduated. He's a full international player. Jordan Larmour the same, Andrew Porter the same, Joey Carberry the same. So that's the difference. I spoke to one of the Leinster Academy guys, and he just said to me, he's a coach, and he just said, look, there's cream in all of the provinces in the academies, but the cream is creamier up in Leinster, and that's the reality. And
the thing is, the thing about it is, and Jerry talks there about, like, I know you did a lot of work of looking at guys they had up there, and even Eoin Clark and a few more guys that you worked with, but that's the new reality of Irish rugby, is that they've got to share the love around the provinces, rather than losing these Irish guys abroad to play in Championship or in Pro D2. If there's quality in another province and he is on the depth chart at number 4 and is not going to get game time in Leinster, whether people and supporters here agree with it or above in Leinster agree with it, that's the policy that the IRFU have now with Nucifora in there, saying, look, you're not going to get game time here in Leinster, we're going to move you down. And that's what happened with Joey. Joey came to Munster, and you know, I would rather see that happening than the guys moving to an Exeter or London Irish, and we've no control over them. We can't, you know, there's a policy there now where guys aren't going to get into Irish teams. So if we have the best out halves in the country playing in each of the provinces, and they can hop off each other every week, and the front row's the same and the second row's the same, the standard of rugby in the country is going to get better. So, you know, some people don't agree with the system, but, you know, they're Irish homegrown players, and we're a small country, we're batting above our average sport-wise, I think, with all the sports we play in, and we have to, I suppose, spread it around as best we can, you know.
It's like, to give you an idea of St. Michael's, for example, the guys who come out of St. Michael's at the age of around, 18, 19, would be physically on a par, I would say, but maybe year 2, year 3 Munster Academy. It's that having that advantage gives you a kind of a shorter turnaround for players, so you can start, you know, packing year on year more guys who are Pro 14 ready, more guys who might be European Cup ready, and then getting a good idea as to who might be test caliber athletes. So I suppose that's the kind of the challenge for Munster is, can you do it over 2 to 5 years and start accumulating those players like season on season on season to get to a point where, okay, now we have a side that can really challenge, but it's just taken longer to get there.
Just if you take it back as well, because I think this one probably resonates a little bit. People talk about the club game and how strong the club game used to be, particularly in Limerick. So when Marcus and I played, we probably would have come out of school probably on a par or slightly below some of our, you know, similar players from Leinster. But you went into the club game here, which was really, really strong, and that's where it accelerated your development as a player. And then you bridged the gap, and you actually you stole a march there. But now that's almost been bypassed, and players are not, they're ready to go straight from school. So the club game is still absolutely crucial. But I think that if you want to, for the professional game, we've got to start focusing on the players and the pathway through the schools and clubs on their way up to academy level.
Any other questions?
Yeah, one more out here.
So you mentioned earlier some of the aspects of the Leinster game that are likely to appear in the Irish game as a kind of a crossover and how the team's got to evolve. But for those of us likely to be watching the upcoming Six Nations from the couch, what are the signs of that or the manifestations of that we're likely to be able to see from the outside? Is that a tactic at the ruck or the breakdown, something that would be in contrast to how we play at the World Cup?
If you watch how Leinster play, I give you contrast Connacht and contrast Leinster. So when you watch Connacht play, Connacht are a team that attacks the line, and then they all reload back into shape. They get real deep, and they play off 10, and they're very, very reliant on structure. So that's good because it gives the players a rough roadmap as to what they're supposed to do. But once you've actually compromised the opposition defence, once you've made a little bit of a break, you just got to flood there, and you've just got to play. The players have got to have the capacity to play heads-up rugby, which is just playing what they see in front of them. So if Fiona makes a break there and gets her hands free, well, then I've got to run for the offload and go. I'm not going to go, oh, Fiona's done well there to steal us a metre, I better get back into shape. If you watch when Leinster play, it is just constantly, they're playing really, really flat, and every time the ball carrier has the ball, he's got a couple of options. He can pull the ball back, he can play the ball a tip on, he can drop it back on the inside, and they just play, and they're just constantly flooding. And I think that the difference is that Leinster aren't reliant on any one individual. If you look at Ulster, are a team that are going really, really well, but when anyone watches Ulster now, they'll go, well, if you can stop Marcel Coetzee, if you can stop John Cooney, Stuart McCluskey, Will Addison, you're Stockdale, you're halfway there. The Leinster is just interchangeable. And I remember I played against the All Blacks a few times, and when I played against them, I just went, every single time they have the ball, they're threatening to score a try. Whereas when I played with Munster and with Ireland, I knew that, Marcus is a very good footballer. Dennis Leamy was you'd have someone like Dennis Leamy and David Wallace who'd be the real danger men when Munster are carrying the ball. But I wasn't a danger man. I was just someone who would carry the ball, and I would just be setting it up for somebody else to then go and try and challenge them. Every single Leinster player that carries the ball has a skill set where they can challenge the opposition defence. They can distribute at the line. They can carry at the line. They can use evasion, use footwork, and that's the difference. Is like it's 15-man rugby. Every single player you watch, when the ball goes wide, if there's a breakdown, you'll see James Lowe popping up and he'll play 9 and move the ball. It sounds so simple, but it's actually that's the future of rugby. And you watch when the All Blacks play, it's because technically they're making the players better every single week. And if you technically make them better, they can play whatever they want. If players can only, you watch this, the way South Africa played is, it's a pragmatic approach to rugby, and your game plan should always fit the player's skill set that you have, not the other way around. Not saying, well, I want to play. I think when Rob Penny came in, he had really lofty ambition for Munster, and it's proven it works in the Southern Hemisphere. But I think some of the players' skill sets in Munster at the time weren't up to speed in catch-pass terms, that they could actually get the ball and transfer the ball quickly enough to exploit space on the outside. So I think that what you will see, look, what do I know? I don't know. But when you're looking at Ireland, if I was coaching Ireland, I would be looking to harness a lot of the energy that's coming out of Leinster, keeping it very, very simple, and just focusing on getting quick ball and just playing with multiple options everywhere.
The other thing that really impresses me with Leinster, and just from watching them over the years, having that advantage of having the screen in front of you as well, playing stuff back, they're so comfortable in defence. And the biggest example of it was when the last few minutes here when they played Munster, they could have defended for another half an hour. They were loving it, and they all defend for each other. But they can let some of the best teams come to the RDS and throw every punch they have in their locker at them, and they're comfortable to defend it. And they can, it could be a close game. It could be half time, and it could be 15-12 or something like that. But it could end up being a 45-point to 12 game. They can even keep teams to nil. We've seen it. They've scored, and that's the difference with the Southern Hemisphere stuff. We see a lot of Southern Hemisphere games, which is 46-34 or 34-30. With Leinster, it's 45-3 or 45-0, and we've seen those this season with them. They pride themselves in their D, and I think it's something that Munster in the last couple of games has slipped a small bit. The defence was really, really strong, I think, in your time, and it's because maybe they're working a little bit more on attack. Defence has slipped a small bit, so that's another element of Leinster's game, I think, that will come into the Irish game, and priding themselves on defence, especially in Six Nations rugby. If you can keep a team at nil or just living off scraps, it's very, very frustrating. And then that's when they try pull a rabbit out of a hat, leave themselves exposed, and that's when a team like Leinster can strike and get a try or 2 tries in the space of 5 minutes.
And here,
one more question over here,
I know you're speaking about the coaching aspect, and obviously
Leinster, but since obviously I know they're bringing in 2 South Africans for next season, is there any other player that if you had the choice in the morning that you would go out and recruit that could maybe add that bit more to it, like as
Cheslin Colby.
It's funny. Yeah, look, I would be very much of the opinion, like there's a young guy, Shane Daly, and it's not that he's distant relative of mine or anything like that, but he's a guy that I just think is quality. I think he's there's small things. He's a guy that's just got his degree this year, so he's college life behind him. This guy's ready to go. Like, this guy's ready to be given a chance. He's, you talk about the Larmers or the young Stockdales in other provinces. These guys are chomping at the bit to just be given a chance, and I'd love to see that happening. We've got talk about Ben Healy, but there's a young lad, Jake Flannery, who was playing with Shannon. Watched him play for Shannon out here 2 weeks ago, and just a quality player. He was involved at the Irish 20s last year. So these guys are full of confidence. They've won Grand Slams already. They're ready to go, and I just think, as I said earlier on, I think the hand is going to be forced at the coaching staff now to play a lot of these guys in the next couple of weeks, and I'm really excited about that, to see that happening. So I know what you're saying, marquee players coming in, absolutely, but let's look around us first and see what's here.
Another question, have we?
Just to go back to the national team for a minute, and to think about where we were in 2018, the standard of players that we'd achieved in the country, and we thought we had a world-class team, and then decide to the 2019 championship into World Cup. Where did it go wrong, and what can we learn from what happened? Just between ourselves.
Jesus, if we could answer that, I wouldn't be sitting here, I'd say, Look, not dragging up bad memories, but we were both involved in 07, and I think when we ever meet up for a pint, we're still trying to figure out what happened then as well. So, look, it is difficult. It is trying to sustain a level for a country like ourselves right through a couple of seasons is really, really hard. To try and explain it away, I think, even if you had the guys that were in the coalface during the World Cup, they wouldn't be able to explain what went wrong out there. I think I saw them train in Limerick during the summer, and the way they trained, there was no doubt about fitness. There was no doubt about the hours they'd put in, the level of analysis. If anyone knows Joe Schmidt, and you've come across him yourself, Jerry, like they were very, very thorough, and like the argument could be that did they overdo it in that space, and we probably felt maybe that was a space that we, I remember days where things went wrong in 07, and our solution was to work harder. We stayed on the pitch a lot longer. We did more analysis, and maybe the wise thing to do back then was to step away from it for a while, and we didn't do that. My biggest worry is that the powers that be maybe didn't learn from 07, and we haven't learned from our World Cups, and that's probably the biggest criticism I'd have. But then you're arguing, no, there's different staff there, but there has to be stuff put in place that we don't make those mistakes again. And look, as I said, if we knew how to fix it, we'd be probably very wealthy,
I have my own pet theory as to why it didn't work out and why everything looked so much more difficult from 2019 on. I think the loss of Dan Levy was a huge deal to Ireland. I think when he was in the side in 2018 for the Grand Slam year, Ireland had a ball carrying rotation there that was as good as anywhere in the world. And I think the loss of him and his ball carrying from Ireland's pack, I think, changed up a little bit how we played. And I think it changed up a lot of the selection decisions that came around the World Cup as well. And when 2019 came around, I think we went into that first game against England and got a big land in that game. And I suppose your decision then as a coach is, well, geez, do I change up what we're doing here? Or do we just try to do what we were doing better? And I think that's the decision that they made, to go, we're just going to go and maximise what we already are doing. And I think without a guy like Dan Levy, I think we were constantly looking for that extra physicality, because Ireland's game was about retaining the ball. And I think without him, I think we were a little bit easier to defend phase for phase. And I think that ended up being a very, very large factor as to why things started to go and why it all of a sudden started to look so difficult when in 2018 it was looking, you know, where everything was very mechanically falling into place, why it looked so much more different in 2019.